The movers were scheduled for 10 a.m. My daughter-in-law had called them to take the old upright piano I'd had for 30 years to the dump. What she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that at 11 a.m. an appraiser was arriving, and that piano was a 1920 Steinway, insured for over $300,000. That piano sat in our living room for 3 decades. To my son's wife, it was just a bulky, out-of-tune relic. To me, it was the soul of our home. And in 1 hour, those two conflicting realities were about to collide in a way that would change our family forever. I bought the piano in 1992, the year my daughter Alara was born. My wife Claire had passed the year before, and I suppose I was looking for an anchor, something solid and beautiful to fill the silence. I found it at an estate sale in the next county over. It was an upright walnut with ornate carvings on the front panel that were chipped in places. The seller said it was old and heavy and he just wanted it gone. I paid $800 for it and had to hire 2 men with a truck to bring it home. It took them 3 hours to maneuver it into the living room bay window, where it has sat ever since. Alara learned to play on it, her small hands stumbling through scales, then progressing to simple tunes and eventually to the complex pieces she'd perform for me on Sunday afternoons. The sound filled the house. It wasn't perfect. A few keys had a dull thud, the middle C had a slight buzz, but it was ours. It was the sound of our family rebuilding itself. I'm a structural engineer by trade. I understand load-bearing walls and tensile strength. That piano became an emotional load-bearing wall for us. Years passed. Alara grew up, went to college, became a graphic designer. She married a man named David when she was 28. David was cheerful, ambitious, worked in tech. I liked him well enough. He shook my hand firmly and called me sir. What I noticed but chose to ignore was how he looked at my house. He'd comment on the layout potential or how a wall could come down. It was the gaze of a renovator, not a guest. After the wedding, the visits changed. Alara and David would come for dinner and David's attention would drift to the piano. "That's a real space hog, isn't it?" he'd say once. Another time, "You know, they make beautiful digital keyboards now that take up 1/10 of the space." I'd just smile and change the subject. The piano was not up for discussion. The pressure began subtly, the way structural stress starts as a hairline crack. It was Alara who started voicing it. "Dad, the living room feels so dark with that big thing in the window." Or, "Wouldn't it be nice to have a sitting area there instead?" I'd remind her that her first recital piece was played on that piano. She'd sigh, a sigh that meant I was being sentimental, stuck in the past. Then 6 months ago, David got a promotion. They decided to buy a new house, a modern townhouse with an open floor plan. They were excited. I was happy for them. The trouble started when they asked for my help moving some of Alara's old things out of my basement. I agreed. While we were boxing up old textbooks, David stood in the living room doorway, hands on his hips. "You know, with this piano gone, you could really open up this whole floor. Maybe put in some French doors to the garden." I was wiping dust off a box. "I like the piano where it is." "But you don't even play," Alara said, coming to stand beside him. It was the first time she'd said it so directly. "That's not the point," I said. "Then what is the point, Dad?" Her voice had an edge. "It's just furniture, old furniture. It's worth more as firewood than as a musical instrument." That was the moment I should have told them, but something stopped me. A stubbornness, maybe, or the engineer's dislike for being told how to manage his own structure. "It stays," I said, my final word. The atmosphere chilled after that. Visits became shorter, conversations more superficial. Then 3 weeks ago, Alara came over alone. She brought lunch. We ate in the kitchen and she made small talk about work, about a friend's baby. Then she set her fork down. "David and I have been talking. We think it's time you consider downsizing. This house is too much for you. The stairs, the yard work. We found a lovely senior living community just 10 minutes from our new place. You'd have friends, activities." I stared at her. I was 68. I ran 3 miles every other day. I'm not moving. Dad, be realistic. This place is a museum. Half the rooms are empty. That piano alone is a hazard. It's a tripping hazard, and it's probably full of dust mites. It is not a hazard, I said, my voice low. It's a symbol, she fired back. It's a symbol of you clinging to a life that's over. Mom is gone. I'm grown. You need to move on, and this house and that thing are holding you back. We didn't speak for a week. That's when I knew I needed a professional opinion, not to prove anything to them, but to settle my own mind. I'd always had a suspicion. The quality of the cabinetry, the faint, elegant Steinway & Sons lettering inside the frame, visible only when you opened the top. I'd never had it appraised. Claire's memory was tied up in it, and some part of me feared knowing its price tag would cheapen that. But now, with its very existence under attack, I needed facts. I called a specialty appraiser, a man named Alistair Crane, who came highly recommended for antique instruments. His first available slot was 3 weeks out. I booked it for a Tuesday morning at 11. I told no one. The following Sunday, Alara and David came over again, a truce of sorts. David was unusually chatty, helping me clean the gutters. Over iced tea on the porch, he broached the subject again, but with a new tactic. Look, we get it. The piano has sentimental value. How about a compromise? We hire someone to responsibly dispose of it. There are companies that recycle the wood, very eco-friendly. Then we use the space to create a nice home office for you, our treat. Dispose of it, I repeated, the words like ash in my mouth. It's just an object, Dad, Alara said softly, putting her hand on mine. Let us help you let go. I pulled my hand away. No. David's smile tightened. Alara looked hurt. They left soon after. 2 days later, on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, my doorbell rang. It was a young man in a polo shirt with a moving company logo. We're here for the piano pickup, he said cheerfully. My blood went cold. There must be a mistake. I didn't schedule a pickup. He checked his tablet. Scheduled for 10 a.m. today. Client name is David Chen. Says to remove an upright piano from the living room for disposal. That's you right. I stood there, the pieces locking into place with the cold precision of a steel beam. They had scheduled the movers for the exact same day as my appraisal. They had given me no warning. They were simply going to remove it, to take my anchor and my history and my secret, and haul it to a dump before I could even say a word. The mover looked at his watch. My crew in the truck, we're a little early. You want us to wait until 10. I looked past him to the street. In exactly 2 hours, Alistair Crane would be here to tell me what my piano was really worth. And in exactly 1 hour, these men planned to take it away forever. I had 60 minutes to stop them. I looked at the mover, my mind clicking through options with the cold efficiency of a calculator. Denial would only delay them. A scene would bring neighbors. I needed a different kind of leverage. You're early, I said, keeping my voice flat. The appointment is for 10. I have a technician coming at 9:45 to disconnect some wiring behind it. Old house. Can't be too careful. The mover shrugged. We can wait in the truck. Just give us a wave when you're ready. It might take him a while, I said. Might be closer to 11. Another shrug. Our next job isn't until 1. We're on your clock. He tipped his cap and walked back to the idling box truck parked at my curb. I closed the door and leaned against it. The clock on the wall read 9:07, 53 minutes. My heart was a piston. I went to the living room and stood before the piano. I ran my hand along the walnut, feeling the familiar grooves of the carvings, the smooth wear on the edges where generations of hands had rested. I opened the top, revealing the strings and hammers and the faint, elegant script, Steinway & Sons, New York. I had researched it quietly years ago. The serial number, when I finally found it stamped on the iron frame, placed its manufacture in 1924. The height, the case design, pointed to a model called an upright K. I'd found obscure forum posts by collectors speaking of these models with reverence, calling them the aristocrats of uprights, built in an era of unmatched craftsmanship. But forums weren't proof. An insurance policy based on my own hunches was one thing. The word of a certified appraiser was everything. At 9:20, a car pulled up behind the moving truck. It was Alistair Crane's sedan. It was Alara's blue SUV. My stomach clenched. She and David got out. They hadn't seen me at the window. David pointed to the moving truck and gave Alara a thumbs up. She smiled, a tight, relieved smile. They thought it was already over. They thought they'd won. They came to the front door. I opened it before they could knock. "Dad," Alara said, her smile fading slightly at my expression. We wanted to be here, to help." "To supervise, you mean?" I said, not moving from the doorway. David stepped forward, his face all practiced concern. "We know this is hard. We thought it would be easier if we handled the logistics. A clean break. You scheduled movers to enter my home and remove my property without my consent," I said, my voice low. "What do you call that?" "We call it an intervention," Alara said, her own voice rising. "Because you won't do what's good for you. This thing is a millstone around your neck." "It is not a thing." The force in my voice surprised even me. David took a half step back. "It is a 1924 Steinway Model K upright piano. And in 40 minutes, a man named Alistair Crane, one of the most respected instrument appraisers on the East Coast, is going to walk through that door and tell us exactly what it is worth." The silence that followed was absolute. Alara's mouth opened, then closed. David blinked, his brain visibly scrambling to process this new information. "Appraiser," he finally managed. "Yes, David, an appraiser. I booked him 3 weeks ago. His appointment is at 11. Your movers," I said, pointing to the truck, "are scheduled for 10. Would you like to explain the coincidence?" Alara recovered first, skepticism hardening her features. "A Steinway? This old box? Dad, that's ridiculous. It's a beat-up old upright. If it were worth anything, you would have sold it years ago." "Its value wasn't the point," I said. "Its history was. But now, since its very existence is so offensive to you, we will have a definitive answer. We will all stand here and listen to an expert, and then we will decide what happens next." I saw the doubt flicker in David's eyes, quickly replaced by a calculative gleam. The tech guy, always running numbers. "And if it's worth something?" he asked. "Then we will have a new piece of information," I said simply. We stood in a tense triangle in the foyer. The mover from earlier walked up the path, looking between us. "Everything all right? You're, technician here yet?" "Not yet," I said. "There's been a change of plan. The movers will not be taking the piano today. You can leave." The mover looked at David. "Sir, you're the one who booked us." David hesitated, the gleam in his eye brighter. "We'll wait," he said to the mover. "Just wait in the truck a while longer." The mover sighed, muttered something into his radio, and trudged back. We moved into the living room, an armed truce. No one sat. The piano stood between us like a silent witness. Alara refused to look at it. David examined it with new, predatory interest. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. 9:40, 9:50, 10 o'clock came and went. The movers, now bored, got out of their truck and smoked by the curb. At 10:15, a sleek, dark gray Lexus sedan pulled up. A tall, slender man in his 60s, with a neat white beard and carrying a leather folio, got out. Alistair Crane. He glanced at the moving truck, then at the smoking men, a faint look of bemusement on his face as he approached the house. I met him at the door. "Mr. Crane, thank you for coming. There's a family situation. My daughter and son-in-law are here." "I see," he said, his voice a soft, precise baritone. He took in the scene in the living room with a single, sweeping glance that missed nothing: the tense postures, the piano, and the bay window. "Shall we proceed?" I introduced everyone. Crane gave curt, professional nods. He didn't ask about the movers. He set his folio on a side table, removed a pair of white cotton gloves, and approached the piano. For the next 20 minutes he said almost nothing. He opened every panel, peered inside with a specialized flashlight, gently pressed every key from bass to treble, listening with his head cocked. He used a small mirror on a stick to look underneath. He examined the pedals, the hinges, the carvings. He took out a digital camera and photographed the serial number, the interior, the soundboard. Alara fidgeted. David watched like a hawk. I just stood there, my fate being silently assessed by a stranger in white gloves. Finally, Crane stepped back. He removed his gloves. His expression was unreadable. "Well," David blurted out, unable to contain himself. Crane ignored him, looking at me. "You were correct in your identification, Mr. Evans. This is indeed a Steinway & Sons upright Model K. Serial number confirms manufacture in 1924. May I ask what you know of its provenance?" "I bought it at an estate sale in 1992, I said. "The previous owner had passed. No other history was provided." Crane nodded slowly. "A typical story for instruments of this age. They fall out of families, get lost in moves, are mistaken for furniture." He paused, turning back to the piano. "The condition is what we call original but weary. It has not been rebuilt. The soundboard is intact, a minor miracle given its age. The action is heavy and needs regulation. Several hammers are worn. The finish is distressed. These are all expected." "So it's not worth much," Alara said, a note of triumph in her voice. Crane turned his calm gaze on her. "I did not say that." He looked back at me. "The value of a vintage Steinway, particularly from what we call their golden age between the 1880s and the 1930s, is not solely in its playability as it sits. It is in its bones. The quality of the materials, the Sitka spruce soundboard, the hard rock maple action parts, and the craftsmanship of that era are irreplaceable. This instrument is a prime candidate for a full, sympathetic restoration." "And what would that be worth?" David asked, his voice tense. "After restoration?" Crane opened his folio, consulted a notepad. "A fully restored Steinway Model K from this period, done by a top-tier workshop, can sell at auction or through specialized dealers for between $250,000 and $350,000. Sometimes more, if the restoration is exceptional or a particular buyer is seeking this exact model." The numbers hung in the air, physical things. Alara's face went pale. David's eyes widened, his lips moving silently as if doing the math. I felt a strange calm. My secret was out and it was real. $250,000, Alara whispered. "For this." "For what it can become," Crane corrected gently. "As it sits, in its current state, its value is as a restoration project. I would appraise its current fair market value for insurance purposes at approximately $85,000. David let out a sharp breath. $85,000, not life-changing but a substantial sum, a down payment, a year's salary. Alara stared at the piano as if seeing it for the first time. Then her stare shifted to me, and it hardened into something colder than surprise. "You knew," she said, her voice trembling. "You knew it might be valuable. All those times we talked about it. You let us think it was junk. You let me feel guilty for wanting you to get rid of junk." "I didn't know for sure," I said. "I had a suspicion. I protected it accordingly." "Protected it?" David seized on the phrase. "How?" I walked to my old oak desk in the corner, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out a single sheet of paper in a clear plastic sleeve. I handed it to Crane. "This is the scheduled personal property rider attached to my homeowner's insurance policy. The piano is listed. The insured value is $100,000. Crane scanned it, nodded. "Prudent. Standard coverage would be utterly insufficient." David snatched the paper from Crane's hands. He read it, his face flushing. "You insured it for $100,000. When? Why didn't you tell us?" "I had it appraised informally 5 years ago by a piano tuner who had worked at Steinway," I explained, my voice steady. "He gave me a ballpark figure and told me to get it properly insured immediately. So I did. I didn't tell you because it wasn't your business. It was my asset. my decision. Your asset, Alara's voice broke. I'm your daughter. This is my inheritance. And you are going to just let us throw away $85,000 of my inheritance because you were playing some kind of secret game. There was no game, Alara, I said, exhaustion creeping in. There was only you trying to erase a piece of my life and me trying to preserve it. The money was never the point for me. It was a side effect of what the object is asterisk. David wasn't listening to the sentiment. He was still staring at the insurance document, then at Crane. 85,000 now, 250 plus after restoration. Who pays for the restoration? That would be the owner's investment, Crane said. A full restoration can cost between $40,000 and $70,000, depending on the work required. It is a significant undertaking. David's mind was whirring. I could see it, the cost-benefit analysis, the potential profit. He looked at Alara, then back at the piano. The sentimental obstacle had just transformed into a financial asset, and in his eyes I saw the new battle lines being drawn. It was no longer about freeing up space in Dad's living room. It was about who controlled a suddenly valuable piece of property. Crane gathered his things. My written appraisal will be emailed to you within 48 hours, Mr. Evans. It will contain all the details, photographs, and the valuation figures we discussed. He handed me his card. Should you decide to explore restoration, I can recommend several excellent workshops. He left, stepping around the confused movers on the path. The three of us were alone again with the piano, but everything had changed. Alara was the first to speak, her voice cold and distant. You need to sign it over to me. I looked at her. What? The piano. You need to add it to my inheritance specifically. Now, in writing, so this doesn't happen again. David nodded, backing her up. It's the right thing to do, Dad. This clearly has family significance. It should be part of the estate plan, designated for Alara. They were no longer asking me to get rid of it. They were demanding I legally give it to them. The pressure had just morphed into a new, more sophisticated form, and the clock was still ticking, but now on a different kind of confrontation. The movers outside were just the opening act. The real fight for control had only just begun. The air in the room had turned to glass. My daughter wasn't asking for a memory. She was issuing a claim, and the man I'd welcomed into my family was calculating the return on investment. Sign it over, Alara repeated, the words brittle. Today, we can call a lawyer, get the paperwork started. I looked from her desperate face to David's greedy one. No, I said, the words simple and final. Why? The question was a shriek. If it's not about the money, then what are you keeping it for? To punish me? I'm not keeping it to punish anyone, I said, my patience fraying. I'm keeping it because it's mine, my property, my decision. That's how ownership works. David stepped forward, adopting his most reasonable tone. Let's think this through logically. You're 68. The piano needs a $70,000 restoration to reach its maximum value. That's a big investment for you. For us, as a family unit, it's a strategic asset. We could finance the restoration, sell it, and use the profit for Carter's college fund. It's the smart move. He'd used my grandson's name. A tactical appeal to legacy. It made me feel sick. There will be no selling, I said, and there will be no signing over. The conversation is over. You should go. They didn't go. The standoff stretched. The movers, finally paid off by a scowling David, drove away. Alara and David stayed, circling the issue like sharks. They shifted tactics, guilt, anger, faux concern about my ability to manage such a valuable asset. I stopped responding. I made coffee, sat in my armchair, and waited them out. They left as dusk fell, slamming the car doors. The silence they left behind was worse than the arguing. It was the silence of a fracture. The next morning, the formal appraisal from Alistair Crane landed in my inbox. It was a dense, 5-page document full of technical terminology and high-resolution photos. The final valuation for insurance purposes, $87,500. He included a list of 3 restoration specialists. I printed it, slid it into the folio with the insurance papers, and locked it back in the desk. The siege began in earnest. Phone calls, long pleading voicemails from Alara about family unity, text messages from David with links to articles about optimal estate planning and avoiding probate disputes. They came by twice more that week, always unannounced, always with a new angle. David brought a contractor friend to assess the space for potential renovations, which I refused to allow. Alara brought my grandson, Carter, hoping the sight of him would soften me. It did, but not in the way she intended. Holding him, I felt a fierce, territorial urge to protect what was mine, for his future on my terms. Then the legal envelope arrived. It was from a firm called Hartwell and Associates, a formal letter stating they represented my daughter, Alara Chen, regarding the disposition of certain personal property of significant value. It argued that the piano, due to its intimate connection to family history and my daughter's musical upbringing, constituted a unique chattel with expectant inheritance interest. They requested I voluntarily enter into a binding agreement to bequeath the piano specifically to her, or, alternatively, to transfer title now with a retained life estate from me. The alternative was further legal exploration, a phrase that tasted like threat. My hands were steady as I read it. The cold, professional language was more hurtful than any of Alara's shouts. She had lawyered up. Her husband had convinced her to weaponize the law to take what she wanted. I didn't call her. I didn't call David. I called the number on my insurance rider, the one for the Special Risk Management Department. I explained the situation. A valued scheduled item was now the subject of a familial legal dispute. I asked what my policy covered. The representative was calm and clear. The policy protects against physical loss or damage, Mr. Evans. It doesn't cover legal fees to defend ownership from family members. However, she continued, given the scheduled value, we do have a strong interest in its security. Do you believe there's a risk of forced removal or vandalism? I looked at the legal letter. The risk profile has changed. Understood. We recommend ensuring your home security is current. Document all interactions, and we can provide a list of attorneys who specialize in tangible asset and estate litigation if needed. I took the list. I called the first name, a woman named Susan Park. The same Susan Park from the original prompt, though I didn't know that then. She listened without interruption as I laid out the timeline. The piano's history, the appraisal, the insurance, the demand for disposal, the new demand for transfer, the legal letter. Her first question was razor sharp. Do you have a will, Mr. Evans? I do. It leaves everything to Alara in a trust with David as a co-trustee. And does it specify the piano? No, it's part of all tangible personal property. Then under your current will, she gets it when you die anyway, Susan said. This legal demand is bizarre. It's aggressive and unnecessary unless... Unless what? Unless they want to sell it now and they know you'd never agree. Or unless they're concerned you might change your will. Have you threatened to change your will? No, I said, but the question planted a seed, a terrible clarifying seed. They're creating a paper trail, Susan explained. The legal letter establishes their claim. If you refuse, they might next petition for a conservatorship, arguing you're being irrational about a high-value asset. It's a tactic, a nasty one. I felt the floor tilt. A conservatorship, my own daughter trying to have a court declare me incapable of managing my own affairs, over a piano. What do I do? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. You have 3 moves. 1, you do nothing. Let them waste money on legal threats that have no basis but risk the conservatorship angle. 2, you engage me to send a cease and desist letter, shutting down direct communication and forcing everything through counsel. It escalates but draws a bright line. 3, you preempt them. You change your will. Today. I was silent for a long moment. Changing my will feels like surrendering to the threat. It's not surrender, Susan said. It's a strategic repositioning. You remove the incentive for the attack. If the piano is no longer slated to go to her, their entire legal argument, the expectant inheritance interest, collapses. They have no standing. It becomes a simple gift, and you are under no obligation to give it. The logic was impeccable. It was also heartbreaking. To legally disinherit my daughter, even from one single item, felt like a nuclear option. It felt like making the fracture permanent. I need to think, I said. Think quickly, Susan advised. The fact they sent a letter means the clock is ticking. They will follow up. I hung up and walked to the living room. The piano stood serene in the afternoon light. I thought of Alara as a child, painstakingly picking out Fou-Elise. I thought of David's eyes, calculating profit margins. I thought of Carter, who might never hear its restored voice. I was standing at a crossroads, and both paths led to a different kind of loss. 2 days later, Alara called. She didn't mention the letter. Her voice was sugary false. Dad, we're having a family dinner on Sunday, just us. Can you come? We miss you. It was a trap or a peace offering. I couldn't tell. My engineer's mind assessed the risk. Going could be a chance to de-escalate. It could also be an ambush. I'll come, I said. The dinner was at their new townhouse. It was all sharp edges and open space, no room for a bulky old piano. Carter was in a high chair. The conversation was strained, circling safe topics. Then, as David cleared the plates, Alara reached across the table and took my hand. Dad, about the piano, I'm sorry about the lawyer letter. That was David's idea. It scared me. I need to know it stays in the family. Can you just promise me, a verbal promise? I looked at her hand on mine. I remembered Susan Park's warning about paper trails and verbal promises. This was another tactic, a softer, more insidious one. I can't make that promise, Alara, I said gently, removing my hand. Because a promise about what happens after I'm gone isn't mine to make. It's yours to earn. Her face fell, then hardened. David, leaning in the doorway, shook his head in disgust. The facade was gone. Alara stood up, her chair scraping loudly. You're choosing a piece of wood over your own flesh and blood. No, I said, standing as well. You are choosing your greed over your father, and I won't be bullied. I left. As I drove home in the dark, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from David, not Alara, David. You're making a huge mistake. We're not going to let you throw away Carter's future. We have options. The threat was now explicit. We have options. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I went straight to my desk, unlocked the drawer, and took out Susan Park's card. I called her. It was 9 p.m. Susan, I said, my voice echoing in the dark house. It's Robert Evans. Let's do option 3. I want to change my will, and I want you to send that cease and desist letter first thing in the morning. There was a brief pause on the line. Are you sure? I looked through the archway into the dark living room, where the silhouette of the piano was just visible against the streetlight glow. It was no longer just an heirloom or an asset. It had become a test of my autonomy, a test of their character, and they had failed. I've never been more sure, I said. Draw up the papers. The piano and the proceeds of its eventual sale will go into a new trust for my grandson, Carter, accessible only when he turns 25, and his parents are to have no role as trustees. It was the ultimate countermove. It protected the asset. It secured a future for my grandson, and it completely cut David and Alara out of the equation. By turning their weapon, the future, against them, I had just started a war that would make the battle over the living room seem like a minor skirmish. The fight for the piano was over. The fight for my family was about to begin. The cease and desist letter from Susan Park arrived at their townhouse the next morning. My new will was signed and notarized 2 days later. The silence that followed was different, heavy, and waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped 1 week later, not from Alara or David, but from Hartwell and Associates. A new letter addressed to Susan. They were petitioning the court for an emergency hearing, alleging I was suffering from age-related financial incapacity and was making irrational, spite-based estate decisions that jeopardized a valuable family asset. They requested a temporary conservatorship over my financial affairs. They cited the piano's value, my sudden and secretive insurance policy, and my hostile disinheritance of my daughter as evidence of impaired judgment. Susan called me, her voice crisp. "They've gone nuclear. This is the move I warned you about. It's aggressive and it's ugly, but we are prepared." We had 2 weeks until the hearing. Susan had me gather every document, bank statements showing decades of sound management, tax records, my engineer's license, letters from my doctor attesting to my mental acuity, even my running club membership. We built a fortress of competence. But the hardest part was the personal affidavit I had to write, explaining to a stranger in a robe why I was cutting my daughter out of one part of her inheritance. I wrote it in one long, painful night. I didn't talk about the money. I talked about the pressure, the movers, the legal threat, the feeling that my home was no longer my own. I wrote about wanting to protect something for my grandson from the very forces that were trying to take it from me. The hearing was in a small, wood-paneled courtroom. Alara and David sat with their attorney, a sleek man in an expensive suit. I sat with Susan. We did not look at each other. The judge was a no-nonsense man in his 60s. He listened as Hartwell's attorney painted a picture of a confused old man, swayed by sentiment, making a rash decision that would deprive his family of a significant resource. He called the piano a wasting asset and my actions financially irrational. Then Susan stood. She didn't just defend me, she went on the offensive. She presented the timeline, starting with the unscheduled movers. She entered into evidence the appraisal and the insurance policy I'd held for 5 years. "This is not a sudden decision, Your Honor. This is a 5-year plan for preservation, disrupted by a sudden, aggressive attempt at dispossession." She presented the first legal demand letter from Hartwell. The petitioner didn't seek a family discussion. She sought legal title. When that failed, she now seeks to have her father declared incompetent. This is not about protection. It is about control. Then she played her ace. With the judge's permission, she called me to the stand. Hartwell's attorney objected, claiming I was the subject of the petition and not a reliable witness. The judge overruled him. "I'd like to hear from Mr. Evans." I took the oath. Susan led me through a series of calm, clear questions about my career, my finances, the piano's history. Then she asked the central question. "Why did you change your will, Mr. Evans?" I looked at the judge then for the first time at Alara. She was staring at her hands. "I changed my will because I felt under siege, because a piece of my home, a piece of my history was being treated as a commodity to be taken. I wanted to place it beyond the reach of that conflict. I wanted it to go, undisturbed, to my grandson, in the hope that when he is older, he might understand its value in ways that have nothing to do with money." Hartwell's attorney cross-examined me, trying to trip me up on dates, on figures, trying to provoke me into anger. I remained calm, citing dates and numbers with the precision of my profession. He finally sat down, frustrated. The judge didn't rule from the bench. He said he would issue a written decision within 48 hours. The wait was agony. The decision came by email to Susan, who called me immediately. The petition for a conservatorship was denied in its entirety. The judge found no evidence of incapacity. He noted, pointedly, that the petitioner's own actions, scheduling movers without consent, issuing a legal demand for the property, appeared to be the primary catalyst for the respondent's estate planning changes. He called the petition a transparent and unfortunate attempt to use the court as a lever in an intra-family dispute over property. He advised the parties to seek family counseling. It was a total victory, and it felt like a death. Alara did not call. David did not text. The wall was now made of brick and mortar. I had my house, my piano, my legal victory, and a silence so profound I could hear the ghost of my wife's laughter in the empty rooms. Weeks passed, then months. I went through the motions of life. I had the piano professionally tuned for the first time in years, a small act of defiance and care. The tuner, an older gentleman, spent hours on it. As he packed up, he said, "You know, she's a beauty, a real sleeping giant. With a full restoration, she'd sing like a choir of angels." "I know," I said, "but I think I just need her to whisper for now." The first crack in the silence came in the form of a birthday card for Carter sent to my house. It was just a card signed Love, Ilara and David. No note, but it was a thread. I sent a gift back, a sturdy wooden train set. I didn't hear if he liked it. Then on a rainy Tuesday in October, my doorbell rang. It was Ilara. She was alone. She looked thinner, older. She held a single, damp grocery bag. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I stepped aside. She went to the kitchen, pulled out a container of soup from the bag, homemade by the look of it, and put it in my fridge. She stood there, her back to me. "David moved out," she said to the refrigerator door. 2 months ago. He said I'd chosen my father over my marriage. He said the whole thing proved my family was dysfunctional and he wanted a clean break." I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry, Ilara." She turned around, her eyes red. "No, you're not. You won. You got what you wanted. The piano, the house, your principles, you got it all." "I didn't want this," I said, my voice breaking. "I never wanted a war. I just wanted to be left in peace in my own home." She sank into a kitchen chair and put her head in her hands. The anger seemed to drain out of her, leaving only a profound exhaustion. "I know," she whispered. "I know that now. I got so twisted up. David was in my ear about investment and assets and legacy, and I was so scared of being left with nothing, of you leaving me with nothing, that I couldn't see I was trying to take something that wasn't mine to take." We sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time. The rain tapped against the window. "The will," she started, then stopped. Is it really going to Carter?" "Yes," I said, "in a trust, for when he's 25, for his education or a home or whatever he needs. The piano or the money from it, if it's sold, is his. Not David's, not yours, his." She nodded slowly, absorbing it. That's good," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. "That's right." It wasn't a full reconciliation. It was a beginning, a fragile, tentative restart. She started visiting, sometimes with Carter. We didn't talk about the piano. We talked about the weather, the news, her new job. The piano sat in the living room, a silent third party to our awkward peace. Then last month, something shifted. Carter, now 2.5, was toddling around the living room. He stopped at the piano, reached up and smacked a low key with his open palm. A deep, resonant asterisk thunk echoed in the room. He giggled, a pure, joyful sound, and did it again. Ilara, watching from the couch, smiled, a real, unguarded smile. "He likes it." "He does," I said. After a moment, she spoke, her eyes on her son. "I'd like to hear it when it's fixed. I'd like to hear what it's supposed to sound like." I looked at her, then at the piano. The final, surprising detail wasn't about the instrument's value or a hidden letter. It was about a new beginning. "So would I said. "I've been thinking about it. I'm going to have it restored, not to sell it, to keep it, for him, for this house." She met my gaze, and for the first time in over a year, I saw my daughter in her eyes, not an adversary. "I think Mom would have liked that," she said. And in that moment, the war was over. Not with a legal decree, but with a child's laugh and a mother's memory, and a decision to build something new from the old, beautiful bones. The foundation, tested to its limit, had held, and on it, we could finally start to rebuild. The restoration of the piano begins next month. A specialist workshop will take it apart, painstakingly repair each of its 12,000 parts, and return it to me in about a year. It will cost more than I originally paid for my first house, but I'm not paying for an investment. I'm paying for a resurrection. This whole ordeal forced me to ask a difficult question. What is something actually worth? Is it the number on an appraisal, the figure in an insurance ledger? Or is it the weight of memory it holds, the silence it fills, the future it promises? For a long time, I thought those were two separate scales, the financial and the sentimental. I've learned they are inextricably linked. The monetary value gave me the power to protect the sentimental value. Without that insurance policy, without that secret knowledge, the movers would have taken it. Its song would have been silenced in a landfill. Its value, in every sense, would have been zero. We live in a world that often mistakes price for worth. We discard the old, the worn, the inconvenient, assuming newer and shinier is better. But history has a value. Craftsmanship has a value. The patience and skill of hands that worked a century ago have a value that no modern factory can replicate. That piano, built in 1924, carries in its wood the vibrations of a world that no longer exists. It is a time capsule of sound. And we almost threw it away because it was dusty and took up too much space. The greater cost, of course, wasn't financial. It was relational. The piano became a litmus test for something darker. Entitlement pressure, the way family can sometimes confuse love with ownership. I had to draw a line not just around a piece of furniture, but around my own autonomy. Saying, "This is mine," became the most difficult and most necessary sentence I've ever uttered. It fractured us. But in that fracture, truth finally had room to grow. Now a new sound is in the house. The sound of a toddler's laugh bouncing off the strings. The sound of tentative conversation over coffee. The sound of a future being negotiated, not demanded. The foundation held, not because it was rigid and unmoving, but because it was built on something true, the right to one's own peace, the dignity of one's own choices. So look around your home. Look at the old clock on the mantle, the painting in the hallway, the rug worn thin by generations of feet. Before you decide it's just clutter, before you let someone convince you it's worthless, ask yourself, what story does it hold? What value is hidden beneath the surface? Its true worth might not be in a bank vault, but in the quiet continuity it provides, the bridge it forms between a past you cherish and a future you are building. Thank you for listening to this story. If you found a lesson in these keys, consider subscribing for more documentaries about the hidden value in plain sight.